Yo, what's going on? Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about little jumps. Little jumps are probably more dangerous than big jumps, or at least cause more minor injuries than big jumps cause major injuries. How is that possible? Well, little jumps are kind of everywhere, you know? Whether they're intended to be jumps or whether they just kind of take the form of a jump or make jumping a possibility, they're more readily available than big jumps. In addition, they're on like more trails that a wider range of riders with different skill levels will ride, so beginners are more apt to ride small jumps than big jumps. Makes total sense, right?
All right, so I am out from behind bars here and I am behind the computer. We will take a slowed down, close look at what goes on when it comes to jumping small jumps. For the purposes of this video, I will define a small jump as one where the transition is slightly larger than your wheelbase or smaller. Okay, so let's talk about what makes little jumps dangerous and difficult for new riders. A little jump has a small transition, so that means that when you ride into this, your momentum tries to carry through that transition rather than the transition pushing back on you and redirecting your trajectory. So a larger jump will actually be easier to ride because the transition is longer and stretched out. So your mass will kind of run into that transition and be redirected up it over a period of time, a longer period of time than it would be on a small transition. A small transition, you're going to hit this and it's going to enact forces on you pretty quickly, and then it's soon after you're airborne and you're dealing with the result of those forces. Consider small jumps like a quick push from a friend when you're not ready for it, and larger transitions as more of a slow but strong push from that friend. So let's talk about how we handle these forces. So this is me riding into this small jump, and it's a little bit on a decline here. If it doesn't look level, it's because I'm riding slightly downhill. And I did this purposeful because most jumps you'll find are, on a slight downhill slope. So to ride a transition like this safely, it comes down to two things. It comes down to body position and it comes down to body movement. Sounds simple, right? Well, it kind of is. You just need to build good habits, and I'm going to go over what works best for me, and I think what works best for most riders. So let's talk about approach body position. The ideal body position that I have found is to have your knees over your toes with your weight focused on your heels, and your shoulders too will be above your knees, and depending on the lead up to the jump, depending on the trail, the conditions, they might be slightly in front of your knees, but they will never be behind your knees, your shoulders that is. The reason why knees over your toes is so important is because that ensures your body mass is above your bottom bracket, and that is where you most definitely want it to be when you ride into a transition. I always think light hands when I ride into a jump, because a heavy grip on your hands will focus your body into trying to find balance in your hands, and all of your balance really should be in your legs. Jumping is 90% legs. So at this point, I'm focused on pushing my weight into my heels. You see my heels go down at this point, right as I ride into the transition. In my mind, I'm thinking I am dragging my heels across this transition. I'm pushing it. I'm trying to push my heels right into that transition. Again, that just focuses my body weight on the bottom bracket and centralized on the bike. That means that it will squash both your front and rear suspension somewhat equally. Okay, let's go back again. So I'm coming in, I'm pushing in to the transition with my heels, and I'm starting to stand up, okay? So an important thing to notice here is when you stand up, you'll notice that your legs are actually perpendicular, or almost perpendicular to the transition. That means you're pushing into the transition. You're not simply just standing straight up on the bike like a pencil. For instance, if my hips were in front of my saddle here and I was just standing straight up, I've seen some people do that. You will most definitely take off the transition early and likely dead sailor and just have very little control in the air. And I'll explain why that's the case here in a moment. But see, I'm pushing into my heels as my bike transitions up the ramp, and I'm standing up. Okay, it's cropped off a little bit, but my torso is perpendicular with the ground. My legs perpendicular with the transition, and all my weight is pushing it into this. This will ensure that my back wheel will track the full length of this transition, and that is very important. So I'm pushing in all the way through, pushing in to the point where my wheel leaves the transition, okay? And we'll talk about this later when you can see my upper body, but at this point here, I'm fully stood up. Okay, so that will be the position that you will have 100% of the time when you approach a jump. So that transition is going to apply force on you. As you hit it, it's going to try to redirect your trajectory. Always the key when jumping is to push into that with the equal force that it pushes onto you, or more force, okay? If you push on it with more force, you'll pop the jump. That's what they call popping. So you'll kind of launch it with a little bit more effort than you would if you equal or match your pressure onto that transition. So here in this example is me just kind of matching the force of the transition. I'm not scooching backwards. You see my hips are still kind of above my seat. We don't want to lift our bike off of it. We want to press into this transition so that force is multiplied as it pushes back onto us, and we use that transition to launch us into the air. We're not pogo sticking into the air. We're not using our suspension to pop us into the air. In this instance, again, I'm just matching the force of the transition. I'm not popping. So you see, I still have what I call strong legs. That means that my body mass, as I hit that transition, my legs are strong enough that my body doesn't sink into my bike or sink backward. So I'm having strong legs. They're not locked out. My legs are strong. And I just ride those strong legs right off the transition. So my hips are pretty steady in location to my frame and my bike. And my strong legs just control that force that ramp is pushing back on me, and I don't allow it to overpower me because I'm matching that force. You can really see here that my back tire and my suspension is squashed all the way through the transition. So let's look at it from another angle. You really don't have to worry about popping too much when you're starting. You really just want to control the transition with strong legs. You really don't need to worry about bunny hopping or doing any type of hopping motion. Again, you really just want to learn how to feel out the transition with your legs and stand up into the transition rather than worrying about popping off of it. So this one, I'm coming in low, my knees are over my toes. Again, I'm really pushing my heels into that transition, and I'm standing up, okay? I'm leading with my shoulders. As I stand up, I'm leading with my shoulders. And I'm finding my arc. Let's play that back. You see, there's really no aggressive popping motion. It's just real strong legs right there. I just push right into that transition. So when you're not focused on popping, the body motion just really is very simple. So here's an example where I let my hips slide backward as I ride up the transition. And this is a very common mistake for newer riders, because what happens is they push back away from the transition thinking that they're going to control it better by pushing away from it or pushing through it, where really you want to be more forward on the bike. So as I come in, my knees are over my toes, but here, this could be a panic moment, or, oh gosh, this thing is really going to throw me far. What do I do now? So here's where I start sinking back. See, my hips start going back. And as my hips go back, all of my weight now is above my rear wheel, okay? And my body mass is still mainly traveling this direction, but this transition wants me to go this direction. So what's going to happen is when my body weight is above my rear wheel as much as it is here, it's going to hook me right here. I'm going to get hooked, and you're going to see what happens when kind of that hooking sensation will throw you forward over the bars. So you would think, being so far back, there's no chance that I would go forward over the bars. But really, the main cause for going over the bars is being too far back, because all of my weight here shifts right back. Right here's where I let the ramp take control. I'm not letting my body, my mass, or my strong legs, I'm not letting those retain control. I'm absorbing the end of the ramp with my legs now, and I'm scooching backward. And what that's doing is it's just hooking my rear wheel. It's pitching me forward. So if this were a bigger jump, that would be a dangerous scenario. Or if it were a more what they call lippy jump, or a steeper transition. We don't want to let our body sink into the bike and try to absorb that transition.
Check this out. We have a very little tabletop on a trail, and in its earlier years it was a little bit more of a tabletop, but time has worn it away, and riders rolling over it has worn it away, and it just has never gotten any love, and I don't think that it ever will. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn on it, okay? See, the lack of the transition just means we have to work harder on the right skills rather than relying on the jump to do the work. So I love jumps with a roll transition for that reason. You can learn so much on them. Okay, so let's look at the distance here. 1, 2. So this guy is actually 3 bike lengths long, okay? It's got a deceiving length, it's got a short height. We're coming right out of a very sharp turn, and there's maybe, I don't know, 35 feet here between the turn and the jump. So we can't rely on speed for this, okay? We have to rely on body technique. It comes down to everything that we do between this point and this point here. We have maybe 7 feet here that's going to determine if we make this jump or not. Get out of there. Let's jump it.
Okay, so let's talk about a scenario where you may have to pop a little bit harder to clear a distance, okay? Where you just don't have that transition to give you that boost or that oomph that you need. Everything I spoke about earlier still holds true regarding body position and how you handle it with your lower body. The difference here now is how much power you put into your legs and your stand-up. Important thing to note when you need to boost or pop a small transition is you're not going to really pull much with your arms, okay? You're simply just holding onto the bars, and the motion that you make with your body creates that lever action that you need to really give you the lift that the transition will not give you because it's, just too small. So as I go up, I'm pushing in with my heels. I'm riding with very strong legs, and my stand-up is more aggressive. It's more it's quicker, it's more explosive. So as I stand up, my back is straight, my core is tight, my arms are straight, and simply just by holding my bars in that body position will create a lever scenario. And I really push in with that back wheel. And right there's where my lever explodes. And to control my arc now is in my shoulders and my upper body. So I stood up, now I'm starting to bring my body forward on the bike, and my main mass here, which is really everything between my hips and my shoulders, that's really what's driving my arc now. We didn't have a transition that could offer that. The bike certainly isn't going to drive the arc. It's all in the motion of my upper body here. So as my shoulders come through, I find my arc, I level out. I hear a lot of people talk about pushing down to match a transition. I never ever once thought about pushing down. I do think about diving into it, and by diving into it, I mean is you really bring your head forward on the bike and your shoulders forward, and that will kind of give you that diving, or maybe what most people think is pushing down motion.
So as I come up, I'm not going back and leaning back, thinking that my bike's a lever. I'm sinking into it with my knees over my toes, and I'm pushing through my heels, and I'm tying my shoe. I'm pushing through my heels and standing up, okay? I'm not pulling up with my arms either, and I'm not really thinking about hooking my toes and pulling my bike up to me. That push into this little transition, that push and this little transition, those two forces will bring my bike up into me. And because I've pushed and I've stood up with my shoulders and my upper body, the main part of my body mass is leading the arc. So I'm standing up and I'm finding my arc and I'm coming back down, right? We're leading with everything up here. This is where our weight is. This all weighs more than our bike, even an e-bike. So everything I learned about jumping as a younger kid, I learned on stuff like this. We didn't have jumps. I mean, we didn't have medium-sized jumps. We certainly didn't have big jumps. It was just small stuff in the woods like this, and most of it was crap that we piled up and threw some dirt on. And that taught me how to jump. It taught me a great foundation of jumping.